Ever since the Switch came out, I felt divorced from my 3DS. It's got a better screen, it's got more comfortable controls. Why would I need to go back? But recently, I found my 3DS charger, which inspired me to return to archaic hardware to revisit one of my favorite games of all time. Kid Icarus Uprising. In early 2012, when I sold my Xbox 360 to get this game, I went in with relative ignorance, only being aware that this title was developed by
the Golden God,
who delivered upon the world
Super Smash Brothers!
Masahiro Sakurai. Given his legendary game design and borderline insane dedication to his craft, I really should not have been as blown away as I was at the quality of this title. Kid Icarus Uprising is downright one of the most fun and most polished games I have ever played. In fact, I think this is the best Kingdom Hearts spin-off title. I would even go as far to say that this is as good as any of the numbered titles. Now, I wouldn't blame you for not realizing this is a Kingdom Hearts game. It's pretty odd to not call it Kingdom Hearts with Kid Icarus as a subtitle. This is probably the strangest title in a game series known for its unconventional titles. It will probably end up making sense in a weird and dumb way. Maybe it's referring to Sora's Pit's flying ability. Sora must be limited in this title. Kingdom Hearts was originally pitched as a crossover between Disney and Final Fantasy, but grew into something much more. This game only has one Disney world, Olympus. But this Olympus showcases scope and ambition unmatched elsewhere in the series, even Olympus in Kingdom Hearts 3. And it's a bit different. I don't really understand why they had to replace James Woods' Hades.
What's with this guy?
Pretty dramatic redesign of a Disney classic.
Who invited you to the party? Stay out of this. This is my show.
And he makes returns in future titles. But honestly, I don't say this lightly, the new Hades is just as good.
how dare you!
So I'm not complaining.
You're welcome.
And there's one Final Fantasy character, I think. It would make sense since they historically appeared in Olympus. The crossover elements will be largely disappointing to those here for the Disney or for the Final Fantasy. But hey, at least they had the first Nintendo crossover with Metroid. They also reference other Nintendo properties.
Those ARM troops are doing their best game watch impression. We're gonna rack up some serious Nintendo's trainer points together. Hold on a second. Your math is a little off. You might want to break out the brain age, pal.
We would get a continuation of this with Classic Kingdom, but that is a far cry from the abundance here. I would expect something like this from Sakurai. He's also left his mark on this game in other ways. Not quite tilting the menu, but it's fun to shuffle the menu icons around on the touchscreen. Idols are also pretty much trophies. And the credits look a bit familiar. A whole Kingdom Hearts game based around Nintendo crossovers sounds like a dream game. It would be kind of like Smash Bros. World of Light, but a third-person action RPG. Something I'm still left wondering is, how does this game fit into the lore?
Given the presence of
The Gazing Eye? It's not what it's called. Oh.
We know that the Master of Masters has seen these events. I just can't figure out if he's like stoned or maybe this is his other eye. The development team was called Project Sora. Perhaps this is part of the Sora Restoration Project. That would explain the similarities between Sora and the new protagonist, Sora Analog Pit. Or maybe this is just some weird fanfiction that Sora wrote on Destiny Island after he got back from his adventures, envisioning himself as a great hero of Olympus.
Your days of darkness are numbered. Prepare to meet the light.
He always did resent being a junior hero. This seems to make the most sense to me, given the changes that we've seen to Olympus.
Get up on the Hydra's back!
We will probably get a full explanation in 13 to 25 years, with some secret reports, or, if we're really unfortunate, a phone game.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
This game features an upgraded version of the mission format from 358 over 2 days. Rebranded chapters. Every chapter adds new enemies, contributes to the story, and rewards repeat playthroughs. Big improvements over Roxas is bored and given monotonous tasks, so you will be given monotonous tasks and be bored. When you start a chapter, you're presented with a difficulty slider from 0 to 9, with 2 being the standard difficulty. You bet hearts as currency, and the higher the difficulty, the more hearts you bet, but the more hearts you will reap in return. Which, in the context of the series, kinda seems like a villain thing to do.
Bring me more hearts.
What are you hiding? In addition to increasing the difficulty, betting hearts will net you better rewards and give you access to difficulty-exclusive battle gates that have their own challenges and rewards behind them. You can also spend hearts to decrease the difficulty down to effortless. Every chapter is given a laurel that starts out green, and once you've found all the chests and any other secrets, it turns gold. Basically your golden Mickey stamp. Accumulating rewards under the same save data with modular difficulty and having the chapters be replayable helps alleviate an issue I have with a lot of these games. Kingdom Hearts game systems are always larger than the story and even the post gameplay. Maxing out things like levels, drive forms, command collections are only doable with a lot of grinding on the side that isn't really what you want to be doing. And with Birth by Sleep in particular, you have to do it 3 times. The chapter system helps minimize the feel of grinding, because you're not simply respawning hordes of enemies to be cleared out repetitively on end for hours. I also think it's nice to get used to the particular quirks and nuances of a battle engine before you try and challenge yourself with the hardest difficulty available. This game gets hard on higher difficulties. Oh my goddess. So it's nice to be better equipped after progressing through the game some. Sakurai intended for you to get an idea of where enemies spawn and how the levels work before you start trying to tackle them at a higher difficulty. Some of the levels have multiple routes and are cleared easier once you know the layout and can plan out which route you want to take. I highly recommend playing through the game on a lower difficulty for this reason, and also just to soak in these beautiful 3D visuals. I find it hard to hold the 3DS at a good angle for the 3D when I'm playing it on a harder difficulty, even with the improved face tracking 3D of the new 3DS. Normally, the 3D isn't even a feature that I want to use on my 3DS, but Kid Icarus deserves to be viewed this way at least once. This is already the prettiest game on Nintendo 3DS, but the 3D breathes extra life into the graphics. It's no secret the 3DS's screen resolution is pretty low, but the added feeling of depth helps mask this and enhances an already stellar looking game, especially in this game's world traversal segments. Instead of flying to different Disney worlds, you are flying to several locations only in Olympus, making this the most intricate and detailed world out of any world that's ever been in the series. You'll see towns, the underworld, space, under the ocean, pocket dimensions. The scope and ambition is incredible. You move Pit around with the circle pad to dodge incoming attacks and obstacles. You control a reticle on the bottom touchscreen, which correlates to a reticle on the top screen, and these controls are extremely accurate. There's even adjustable sensitivity. You fire projectiles, or whack enemies that get too close, with the shoulder button. Shooting makes you move slower, so spamming out attacks is not always optimal, especially when you consider that if you cease fire for a few seconds, Your reticle will change, signifying you have a charge attack. These rechargeable blue circles in the bottom left corner unleash a screen-encompassing super attack that also blocks any incoming attacks. These on-rail shooter segments are far better than traversal has ever been in any Kingdom Hearts game.
Oh, jeez, Rick.
Easily better than dream dropping and surfing on Keyblades, which suck already, but also better than the tried and true fan favorite gummy ships. They just cannot hold a candle to this extremely tight interface, which is just as fun as the ground combat for once. Every chapter has these traversal segments, but they only last around 5 minutes because
I can only maintain this power for 5 minutes at a time. After that, your wings will burn up and you'll fall.
I love how Kingdom Hearts has always felt the need to intertwine its gameplay and story, and this is possibly the most meta that the game's writing has ever gotten. The characters seem to know they're in a video game.
You're a boss, Pandora, but you're not my boss.
They even spout out tutorials for the controls and the enemy design in a very on-the-nose fashion.
Use the L button to fire. You can target enemies with the stylus. Watch out, those shots form a toxic cloud when they expire. Shoot them from a distance or melee them to avoid getting poisoned.
I suppose this normally happens at the Station of Awakening, but here it's extremely obvious who the voices are talking to the protagonist. I absolutely adore the cheeky writing in this game.
Somewhere within these ruins is Pitu.
Gesundheit?
No, Pitu. As in pit 2. As in dark pit. Pretty great nickname I came up with, huh?
But not as great as Patooey, right? Right? Anyway.
On the bottom screen, visual novel-esque depictions of the characters will show up to express emotion, or occasionally to depict lore in a cute 8-bit format, as the game has almost constant dialogue over the gameplay.
You've been talking this whole game.
This may sound annoying and distracting in concept, but in reality, it only adds to the enjoyability of the game and its story. You can even turn it off once you've beaten the game and you don't want to hear the dialogue for a dozenth time. The entire game is fully voice acted, which is astounding production quality for a 2012 3DS game, and there wouldn't be the same quantity of voice acting till Kingdom Hearts 3 on the PS4 in 2019.
This might be a good spot to find some ingredients.
The script is incredible in both length and quality. In an odd move, the whole game was penned by Sakurai because he wanted to intertwine the dialogue and gameplay, and he felt it would be easier if he was the one writing it so he could change things on the fly as needed through development. This is impressive, and not only because I thought Nomura was the only person who understood anything about Kingdom Hearts. I knew Sakurai was a master game dev, but he's also a damn good writer.
Impressive, is it not?
This is possibly the funniest game I have ever played, right next to Portal 2, and fans of that one will know that that is extremely high praise.
Those of you who volunteered to be injected with praying mantis DNA, I've got some good news and some bad news. Bad news is we're postponing those tests indefinitely. Good news is we've got a much better test for you, fighting an army of mantis men. Pick up a rifle and follow the yellow line. You'll know when the test starts.
The music isn't done this time by Yoko Shimomura, but the team that Sakurai put together does an incredible job, and the music lives up to her incredible legacy of work. Similar to the dialogue, Sakurai worked closely with the music composers so that he could make the music sync up with moments in the gameplay, especially during the on-rail segments, as their linearity allows for more control of this.
Much better.
You still have to watch out for fire from underworld troops. Let's get you headed toward land.
This effect is pretty neat, and it adds to the overall package of every level. The sound design in this game is top-notch. After flying to your location, it's time for the ground combat.
They're moving their attack to the ground.
Then so are we.
Now this is what we come to Kingdom Hearts for. Third-person action combat, with some magical abilities. This is possibly the tightest Kingdom Hearts game, innovating on many past elements, particularly from the other spin-offs. The shot locks make a return as a main mechanic. In Birth by Sleep, they were extremely flawed, doing massive damage while being invincible the whole time, and they kind of recharge too quickly. It doesn't feel cohesive with the gameplay in my opinion. I was disappointed they chose to rebalance the BBS style for Kingdom Hearts 3. Outside of the excellent movement option where you can zoom up to an enemy, I just feel like it boils down to some flair, some iframes, and it's not very engaging. Kid Icarus Uprising turns the shot lock system from this into an integrated part of Pit's core moveset. Like the traversal segments, you aim a reticle on the bottom screen which correlates to a reticle on the top screen where you can shoot enemies from afar. This eliminates the need for locking on, as the controls are so accurate. And this addition of agency makes projectiles very engaging. You can either wait a few seconds to charge up a strong attack, a la Secret of Mana, or spam out quick, less powerful bursts. And of course, you can always run in and do the traditional wailing on enemies. Because one of your hands is preoccupied with the touchscreen, they needed to make some interesting choices. The camera is controlled by the touchscreen, simultaneously to the shot locks.
Like spinning a globe.
I mean, sure. I guess. This can be a bit finicky at first, but it works better than you would expect. Quick flicks work to quickly move around the camera, and touch the screen when you are facing the direction you want to stop the camera. If you aim the reticle a bit too far to the left or right, the camera will follow. I like the addition of these orange alerts on your periphery, signifying incoming attacks and enemies. They really help your awareness in a 3D space. The attack button is allocated to the shoulder for both melee and ranged attacks. The dodge roll is now a function of the circle pad. If you flip the circle pad as an enemy attacks you, you'll perform a dodge maneuver. And if you are touching the touchscreen while dodging, you will perform a reversal from Kingdom Hearts 2, which will often put you in a good position to launch a counterattack. This could sound spammy in concept, but it takes some timing, and a stamina mechanic limits how many quick movements you can do at once, which makes enemy pattern recognition just as important as ever, especially with the lack of a block button. A big complaint for the controls are how they make your hand feel after extended play. It's not extremely comfortable. They did provide this stand for your 3DS, which I couldn't get the hang of. I always felt it was better just to hold the entire 3DS in my hand, which gets a bit crampy after a while. Maybe this is why the game reminds you to take a break every once in a while. Sakurai does have a history of making arthritis-inducing controls that are actually both fun and accurate, and make destroying your hands worth it. I didn't love this layout at first, but the more I got used to the controls, they started to feel intuitive. In the end, I think for this game, the way they decided to use shot locks is well worth these changes. This game has an extremely tight core battle system. It's clear they designed the on-rail shooter controls for the traversal shooter segments and the ground combat system in tandem. This allows for a consistency when transitioning between the two styles, while working in harmony with the hardware's dual screen layout. They opted for an interesting take on the command deck style, a system featured in Birth by Sleep and Dream Drop Distance, where you stack a limited amount of abilities and items to use on top of the core combat. You can either navigate through them on the bottom left on the 3DS touchscreen, or traditionally navigate them with the D-pad. Or you can even go on the options menu to bind powers and special attacks to your preference. I usually use the touchscreen given the controls layouts, but options are nice. In other command deck games, the combination of how good some commands are and how quickly they recharge often make them feel like the only option against some of the harder bosses and trivializes the horde combat. Dream Drop Distance is basically spam balloons, you win. Might as well have been called Balloon Drop Distance. Kid Icarus doesn't integrate commands into combos as well as magic in the numbered titles, but it balances the command deck by giving commands a finite, limited use, similar to items in command deck games. Sure, you can have a giant mega laser that decimates the foes ahead, or an attack that has a chance of insta-death, but only a few of them. I like the addition of stat spells, such as Energy Charge, where you can boost your power and retain this until you get hit. Without limited uses, this would be broken It would be like air magic in Kingdom Hearts 1, where why wouldn't you cast it all the time? Your abilities are determined by a Tetris-like grid system originally featured in 358 over 2 days. You gain abilities, called powers, throughout the game, and they come in these blocks, which you have to stack into a 6x6 grid. It makes you strive for a balance of using the powers you want while not wasting space. Do you go for a higher level version, which will give you more uses, but also take up much more space? Or do you go for a plurality of powers to last through the longer segments? I love this puzzle dynamic to the abilities in both of these titles. This even resolves some issues. One of the biggest fan complaints is the floaty nature of all the games after Kingdom Hearts 2. Here, outside of level-specific green arrows and jump pads, the only way to jump is to sacrifice grid space for a limited amount of jumps. This makes Kid Icarus the least floaty Kingdom Hearts game yet. I don't think they needed to go quite this far, but the effort and experimentation is appreciated. They also fixed my biggest issue with the grid system. You don't have to fit your level up blocks in the grid space. This game doesn't have a leveling up system at all. While I possibly would have liked to have upgraded grid space or better character stats, I think this helps put more emphasis on the traditionally secondary progression systems that normally supplement levels. There are two main progression systems: quantity and variety of powers, which boils down to the more options the better, and weapons, which have a bit more to them. Like powers, weapons can be rewarded for completing chapters and are found in chests in those chapters. But you can also purchase weapons in the Arms Altar with the hearts of your vanquished foes. You get a variety of weapon classes to choose from, all having their own unique feel. I'm not going to cover everything here because I'm not Divinopedia. For example, clubs deal massive melee damage and have a giant destructive charge shot, but no quick fire. Staffs have amazing range and firepower, but they are very bad at melee. Blades strike a balance between range and melee. Things like clubs and cannons will slow you down, while claws give you a speed boost. Classes are balanced and they offer up unique and different styles of gameplay, and I recommend you give all of them a chance. Even the weapons amongst each class have little things that make them feel distinct from one another, and weapons can have innate attributes to them on top of their class's balancing, such as the Aquarius Blade having freezing melee attacks, or the Hedgehog Claws giving you a speed boost on top of already being in the fastest class. This is all before you take into account star stats and weapon modifiers. The stars on each weapon signify the strength in melee or ranged, on top of the weapon class's innate balancing. Weapons will come with modifiers, which affect weapon attributes separate from the intrinsic things specific to a weapon, such as Dash Attack Plus, which increases your charge attack when dashing, or status effects, such as Burning, that add extra damage if inflicted. Other modifiers, such as Speed and Defense, affect Pit's base stats. These are random, but you can fuse together weapons to make stronger and stronger weapons with better combinations of modifiers. Some weapons can't be made or acquired until you unlock them through completing specific tasks in the treasure hunt. This reminds me most of the command melding in Birth by Sleep. In that game, I felt like I needed a guide in order to get anything worthwhile, or even to know what I'm doing. First time I played Birth by Sleep, I didn't unlock probably half of the command abilities because the melding trees were hyper specific, and I wasn't about to figure it out by guessing and checking. In Kid Icarus, you will need a guide if you want to make the absolute most optimal gear, but that isn't really something that's necessary for most players, unless you really want to do it. You have less control over what you get, aside from using difficulty to increase your chances of it being something good, but you have more options and insight into what to do with it. The intuitive nature of the weapon grid layout, and the game actually showing you what the result of your fusion is, really helps streamline things. And you can make some pretty great gear just from messing around with the fusion system. This is probably what Sakurai intended anyways, but people have a tendency to exploit his games. As stated earlier, the system is heavily benefited from the replayable and modular difficulty nature of the chapters. You won't be grinding much for hearts, or for the weapons themselves, unless you really want to. The Orichalcum crafted Sacred Ultima weapon as part of the story.
This is a far cry from the three sacred treasures of old, eh? This beauty is made of pure orichalcum.
Oh, wow! I don't know what that is. You're just giving it to me? I don't have to do something horrible first?
That depends on your definition of horrible.
Wait! Don't!
Even if you can only use it on the game's final boss, the lack of grinding is a relief. The Keyblade transformations in Kingdom Hearts 3 was an interesting way to integrate this weapon class system into Sora's core moveset, since he uses a Keyblade exclusively. I do really like this system and how you can store up Keyblade transformations by switching between Keyblades, but I think I prefer the way Kid Icarus handles this. The weapons are permanent gameplay changes, at least for the duration of a chapter. In Kingdom Hearts 3, they seem to go away as quickly as you get them. This makes sense, as they were extremely powerful, but variety does not necessarily have to be a straight power boost, and Kid Icarus balances variety very well, while also having interesting progression for increasing your weapon's badassitude and capacity for destroying enemies. The enemies are extremely well designed. They pay homage to past enemies, such as these Mimicuties are similar to the Spider Chest from Birth by Sleep, but with nicer looking legs. This big tank, where you have to move around to get to its weak spot, is pretty much a big body. They have some other interesting enemies similar to the big bodies, but with some different takes. The Gloomerang has horns that you can't harm, but they will throw these horns at you, leaving an opening. There's even these guys, Armin, who have tough skin on the front and the back, and you have to attack between them to get to their weak spot. There's also enemy design inherent to the integration of shot locks, such as these clam guys called Mega Muscles. When closed, they're pretty much invincible, but when they open up, their pearls will rotate and shoot at you. You have to aim to eliminate all the pearls, which will regenerate if you don't take them out quickly enough. The Jitter Hug will switch between red and green. When they are red, you can only attack them with ranged attacks. When they are green, you can only affect them with melee attacks. Morangai is pretty interesting. He forces your screen to look at him as he does this entrancing dance. This limits where you can aim and attack until you take him out. This game also has some of the scariest enemies found in any game, such as the Reapers, who have massive health, do massive damage on their own, and send Reapettes at you if they see you. It's incredibly devastating, and usually better to just try to avoid their gaze. You'll know when they see you because you'll hear this. Sending shivers down your spine. Orn will also play a tune when you are in proximity to them. And these guys will simply one-shot you if they touch you.
Uh-oh, there's an Orn around you, Pig.
Are you talking about the floating skull?
Yes, the slightest touch from one of those will annihilate you.
Sounds painful. Not to mention totally unfair.
Fair or not, just stay away from it.
The switch in music instantly stresses you out, changing the atmosphere and letting you know the terror that is now out for your blood. This is yet another testament to the quality of this game's sound design. And the scariest of all? Food wizards. They will send attacks at you that have big hitboxes that turn you into food if you get hit. If the eggplant wizard hits you, they turn into an eggplant, preventing you from attacking and reducing your health. If you are unfortunate enough to get hit by the tempura wizard, it's even worse. You get turned into tempura, which is similar to getting turned into an eggplant, plus one thing. The tempura wizard will just run up and eat you, ending your life in one bite. Man, this game can be brutal. Another example of this game's flying segments and ground segments being designed together is the enemy design. If an enemy acts a certain way on the ground, you can bet they act the same way in the air too. For example, the Ganymede, skull spider looking dude, will send giant spiked balls at you if you use projectiles on them, but are passive if you use melee. I'm barely scratching the surface here when it comes to the enemies. The variety is simply staggering. Almost every game introduces new Heartless type enemies to the lore, like Nobodies, Unversed, Dream Eaters. This game adds multiple, which is a first. You have the Underworld Army, the Forces of Nature, the Aurum, frickin' space pirates.
Wait, what?
You know, a pirate ship in space. Its crew travels the galactic sea, robbing the heavens of constellations.
That's awesome. I mean, evil.
Bosses are as fun as ever too, containing both the humanoid bosses and the giant monstrous bosses the series is known for. Every chapter comes with a boss, and they are pretty difficult. They all have unique aspects, such as the Giant Reaper, where you change floors to switch between attacking his toes and his head, while avoiding his attacks. The Chaos Kin boss was pretty unique, where you have to take out the Chaos Kin while avoiding trying to hurt Palutena. Hades' Heart is basically Bomberman. Some bosses you even fight while flying. The humanoid bosses can dodge around like the player, so it makes timing a bit difficult and similar to the multiplayer. Just to touch on the multiplayer for a moment, you can take your earned weapons and powers to fight people online, either in a free-for-all or the aptly titled Light vs. Dark, which is much more balanced than the Light vs. Dark in Kingdom Hearts 3 story. It's 3v3 instead of this 13 vs. 7 crap. When either team's collective health reaches 0, one of the players will spawn in as either Pit or Dark Pit, and the goal becomes trying to protect your pit if they've spawned, while trying to eliminate the opposing pit if they've spawned. I really wish more Kingdom Hearts titles would have multiplayer. Sure, in Days and Birth by Sleep, you could take on missions together. Those are pretty cool, but this is the only time where you're actively fighting other players, and it's thrilling. I don't have too much to say here, but it was designed by the guy who made Smash Brothers and Kirby Air Ride, so you know the multiplayer is a good time. The last loose end to tie up are the minigames, a staple of Kingdom Hearts. There is an augmented reality card battle mode that plays like something between Chain of Memories and the Dream Eater battles from Dream Drop Distance. I'm not a big fan of these, but they're extremely optional. Aside from that, there aren't any real minigames. You can try for a high score in the flight battle training, and this one chapter mixes up the flight segment to be a top-down shooter.
Boss, Lux! Giddy up!
This is what the citizens of Daybreak went to war over? Died over? This horse? Worth it. Despite this lack of minigames, which, let's be honest, are usually underwhelming anyways, the overall package of Kid Icarus easily could have been a $60 title if it wasn't on the 3DS. The effort that went into the polish this game exhibits is immense. I can feel the love that went into developing this title, even if the developers reportedly didn't get along too much. They poured their soul into this game for the art of it, and it came out a stellar experience that anybody with a 3DS needs to play. I would even say it's worth buying a 3DS for. I don't really see how there could be a sequel in this style, given the unique control layout and the disbanded development team. Maybe Sakurai could work something out similar to Splatoon and use the motion controls for the aiming, but either way, I hope Nomura gives the keys to the kingdom to Sakurai again, either for a Kid Icarus style game, or perhaps even a main series title. Nobody polishes a game like Sakurai. Almost all Kingdom Hearts games have some crazy after-credits scene, or even a playable segment. This is the only title to actually have most of the game after the credits. I mean, wow. I also find it slightly egotistical that Sakurai added his Kingdom Hearts characters to Smash before adding the main characters like Sora and Riku. But this is the man who made sure Kirby was the only one to survive World of Light, so he has somewhat of a personal bias.
Oh, shut up! You're not clever at all. This game universe and that game universe have nothing to do with each other. So don't go around spreading rumors.
Oh. Huh.
It's funny. It's okay to laugh.
No, it's really not.